Welcome to Open Dialogue here on Ahlebait TV, Sky Channel 745. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host for tonight, and I'd like to welcome all the viewers that are watching from wherever you are streaming and around the globe. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. We are here today discussing current issues, and we have another topic for tonight, which has been in the media a lot. And I think that we have lots to say about this, but to join me in the conversation today, we have our Syed. Salamu alaikum. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for hosting.
You're very welcome. And we also have with our brother Mohammed Jawad. Salamu alaikum. How are you?
Walaikum salam, Fahima. Assalamu Syed. And thank you so much for having me on today.
It's nice to see you. It seems like you're sitting in a spaceship, actually, which is really interesting normally.
Well, this is actually just my editing suite, my studio at the moment. I kind of wish it was a spaceship.
It looks really good. So it'll be really good viewing for everyone that's watching. We have a very interesting topic tonight, and I'm really happy that you're here to share it with us today, especially considering that it is a topic about the male gender. We do hear a lot about toxic masculinity, and I want to sort of talk about it in a different angle. I know everyone's going to have their own perspective, but I want to talk about how, in today's day and age, especially now with the mainstream and the Western society, how we find that the masculinity has been, probably scrutinized to a certain extent. Some because of, certain reasons, because there are extreme behaviors, which is why we have toxic masculinity. But I think it's gone to maybe another extreme where maybe we don't even find men who maybe in the old fashioned way that some women might even, still be looking out for. I know you probably have your own ideas, and I have my own as well as the Sayed. But I just want to come to you first. When you saw that title, what came to mind, and what is your thoughts to start us off, Brother Mohammed?
So basically, I think the first thing we need to sort of understand is what does masculinity actually mean? Okay. Now, the way that I see masculinity, and again, this is totally subjective, but for me, masculinity, okay, is being brave, is being courageous, is being honorable. Okay, is being unselfish, is basically putting other people before you. All right. And what does the word toxic mean? Behaviors which harm others, right? And when I sort of heard the title of this topic, I thought, wow. So this is either going to go one way, one or two ways. Either everyone's going to be like, yeah, let's turn this off. Or everyone's going to be like, this is just blowing our mind. This is an absolutely amazing topic. Now, I totally agree with you. Okay. Now, normally when we talk about masculinity, we always think of like for example, Batman. We'll think of Batman. Yeah, he's proper masculine. Going out there saving everyone. But what we don't see on the other side is a violence at Batman in parts, right? When he's fighting crime, he's violent, he's aggressive, he's hurtful. Now, a lot of men take that as being manly, as being masculine. And a lot of that I feel actually comes from a number of different ways. One, the society and the culture that we are brought up in, I mean, as a kid, right? Okay, for example, right? I remember when I was a kid, I wouldn't say that I was like, the big boy on campus or anything like that. It was always a case of like, yeah, I had feelings, if somebody called me fatty, then I'd feel really hurt and I'd maybe want to cry about it. But I knew that if I cried, they'd make more fun of me. So I held it in, thinking, no, I've got to be brave. Right now, when a lot of people, and especially boys, we grow up in a society where we're told that, listen, man, you got to be brave. You can't cry, That then all of a sudden brings about a whole number of issues. Mental health issues, for one. For example, by suppressing your feelings and by trying to work to a level that you're expected to work towards, you can get anxiety, depression, and then when you suddenly think, oh my God, I've got a mental health issue, then you think, I've got to talk to someone. But you're like, well, if I've got a mental health issue, dude, I'm weak if I've got that, so I can't talk to anyone. And that gets bigger and bigger. So that's one aspect, okay? And another aspect as well is that, we aren't born toxic. sometimes it's just our environment that makes us toxic as well. And again, I'd like to sort of really hear what your views are on this as well. Whether it's mainly the
No,
environment or is it actually growing up.
absolutely. I love how you started that, and I love the analogy that you use, especially what we see in the mainstream, because I think that what we're hearing now in the mainstream is that toxic masculinity is actually within cultures and religion and the way in which it's
Mm,
expected. So that's why I want to bring that up also from that angle. When we hear things like man up, or don't cry like a girl kind of things, and things like that. So Sayed, when it comes to the Western society, just like how our brother Mohammed, you actually mentioned, when you think about masculinity, I know you said many things. What you stood out to me is when you said brave. And nowadays it's been spoken about as saying that as actually a negative, because, the mainstream is kind of sort of saying, well, why should boys or men growing up have to be brave? It's also women that are now brave. There's also like women that can stand up and do certain things. And then it comes to the whole other area, which I have to tackle on another topic of feminism and things like that. So there is a balance, and I know that we have our Islamic perspective, which I think this is why it's really important to discuss it on this show, because we need to rein it back as to what our faith says about the male and the female, and especially about masculinity, and not to be ashamed to a certain extent as to, being a man. But what does that mean, the masculinity? What does the male mean, that gender in Islam? Sayed, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are creation of a wise creator, and the wise creator has very wisely programmed us or designed us, and that is our nature. As brother was mentioning, that nobody is born toxic. The
mhm,
environment later on brings changes into their life. There is a hadith and narration that every child is born on the nature of submission to the will of God. And it's the parents who make them Christian or Jews or someone else. So the environment has a great influence. And that's why in Islamic teachings, it is highly recommended, especially during pregnancy, to be careful of what the parents are doing. I have seen personally the parents who argue and fight and disagree with each other. When the child is born, the child is from the beginning agitated and not comfortable. And when the child grows up in that kind of environment, you would expect results like Hitler and Saddam Hussein. So it is very important that how we bring up our children, and that's very uh, highly recommended in Islamic teachings to take care of that. Of course, there are people like Mukhtar as well in history, that he was brought up in a different environment, and but on the day of Ashura, he used the freedom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him and went against his nature and whatever he was brought up in, and he decided to join Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam in the last moments and last days of his life. So this also is possible, and that shows that we are not forced to, even if we are brought up in a toxic environment, we are not forced to be toxic. Once we are an adult, we can choose our own path and our own way. But definitely we cannot deny that there are impacts There are positive and negative impacts of these environments that we grow up in it. There might be a child who would look and observe everything and decide that I will certainly not repeat what my father and mother are doing to each other,
Yes.
and I will behave differently. And there are children who would just give in and would become victims themselves as well.
Absolutely. No, I really do agree with everything you said. And I'm glad that you raised the point about upbringing, which is what my next question comes to. I think in our communities, we do bring up our boys and girls differently. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. The way I look at it, a lot of the times when I hear of stories, is that the boys are given more freedom and they can get away with a lot of the time, because a lot of the times they feel that whatever they do, their reputation is not as, sort of like, basically for girls, their reputation has to be, like nothing. There has to have absolutely flawless, whereas a boy can get away with it. So that's why they bring them up with a little bit more freedom. What is your thoughts on that? And I hear that a lot. And I know that, even girls complain, especially teenagers, that, my brother's allowed to go out. They can do lots of things, because they're a boy and I'm not, yet I'm the one that's actually studying harder, getting the grades, doing everything. So especially South Asian families, Muslim families, we are brought up in this way. And do you think that could maybe add a little bit of toxicity to that male, to that gender growing up? What is your thoughts, Brother Mohammed?
So it's
I hear
funny you mention that because sorry.
I can see you smiling a lot. Is that something familiar what I've just said?
Yeah, totally familiar because if you ask my 7-year-old daughter right now, yeah, she knows that daddy's going to basically be moving in with her when she gets married, but the boys can do whatever they want. So I've already told her, I'm moving in with you. But no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's sort of like 2 points here, right? Growing up, I mean, I was born in Birmingham, got raised in Milton Keynes, and now I'm living here in Watford, right? And growing up, I'm from a very conservative Pakistani family. My dad is an ex-Air Force pilot, so it was always a case for like, you know what, sit properly at the table and, be a man and all that. But I was lucky in the fact that my dad would always talk to us about feelings, whereas I'd seen in my friends, like basically we got into a little bit of an argument at school in college rather. My friend went home, yeah, beaten up, and he was crying. And the first thing his dad said to him was like, if you don't stop crying, you're out the house. Now think about it. You've just been beaten up, okay? You're bleeding, and you've been told, don't cry or you're going to get kicked out of the house. Man, if that was me, I'd be crying even more, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we need to be, as a man, we need to basically feel and understand what we're feeling and then deal with it, right? Ignoring it, pushing it under carpet isn't what happens. And yes, you're 100% right, that if a girl was to be in an argument and you see her crying, well, oh, that's right, she's just in an argument with a friend. It's right, they're meant to cry. Well, actually, no. If that was the case, then why on earth do we cry every single year on the day of Ashura for Imam Hussain? You're a man, right? Stop crying. Why are you crying for something that happened 1400 years ago? Man up, right? But that's not the case. The reason we cry is because we do feel, okay? Now, I've got 3 kids. I mean, you can probably tell with all the white hairs that are coming through right now. And my oldest is 10, my middle daughter is 7, and my youngest son is 3. And Alhamdulillah, there's one thing that I've realized, that being a man, yeah, and being masculine is all about patience, especially with kids. There's no two ways about it, right? Now, I myself, okay, when my first son was born, the first thing I would say to him when he was like 2 years old, right, when he'd fall over, stop, why are you crying? Man up. And it was my wife, right? She was like, well, look, think about it. You don't want him to sort of go down a route where it's going to be unhealthy for him. And the one thing that I didn't realize when I became a dad first, right, is that when boys sort of get to the age of 3, 4 years old, they actually play with dolls. They'll wear their mom's
Mhm,
shoes. That
mhm.
freaked me out. I was like, dude, what are you doing? You can't do that, take that doll away. And again, I was totally wrong in that, because if at that point we don't allow the kids to really explore, when they get older, they're the ones that are going to revolt. And then when we're talking that, oh, our kids are sort of going on the wrong path and that, well, yeah, that's because we've constricted them, we've held them down. The one thing that I've definitely done, and this is something that I've had to learn the hard way being a parent, is to sort of give equality to all. Now, if I'm letting my son go to school, or walk to school on his own, then I will also let my daughter walk as well. Because in my humble life experience, I have found that my strength comes from the women in my life, my mum, my sister, my wife. That makes me stronger. Because I'm stronger, that will make me more masculine. And when I'm more masculine, I will feel more confident. And when I'm more confident, I have no need to be toxic to those around me because I'm satisfied within myself. But again, like Syed said, it is all a case of the upbringing that we have. And yes, as adults, we do have a choice that we can make. But let's be honest, 8 out of 10 of us, right, okay, and me included in that eight, aren't strong enough to say, you know what, I am making that decision right now that I'm not going to live like that. For me, it's a case of like, well, this is all I've known my entire life. And this is the way that I'm going to go forward. So the question being, how do we then actually break this cycle? You know?
Yeah, it took
So
you a while, like you said, because you actually realized this after becoming a dad. But we have so many young men today who are really so far from that stage, and they are
yeah.
toxic, and they are becoming in that way. You've just realized in your generation, even that it's taken you a while, even though with your environment, with your education, being brought up in the UK, having that sort of custom, that culture in you, that's always sort of carried forward, unless you were lucky enough to actually have a different sort of mindset, different sort of perspective. I also hear a lot that maybe, when you talk about feelings and emotions, a lot of people feel that that isn't masculinity, that isn't something that a man should do. And I personally have had so many women come to me, especially from the South Asian background,
Mm,
complaining, because I do deal with a lot of challenges, especially in relationships. And it's probably the generation above me, more so, but they complain of the fact that their partners, their husbands, do not show any affection. They do not show them love. They're not, sort of like expressing that. So there is a problem. There is a problem with, men in the house brought up in a particular way, thinking that that's the way to be, and suppressing their feelings, that even to the extent where, their relationships are now vulnerable,
mm,
their parenting skills as well, because it also filters down to the children. And then that also creates, children in sort of toxic relationships because they've not had
mm.
that kind of love, feeling, and affection. So it's really important that we raise this topic in that way, because I think there's a lot happening. And I just feel that we need to sort of talk about it in a sort of healthy way, to say that to be masculine, to be male, to have the bravery, but also the affection, to also show vulnerability is the healthy way forward. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to be very straightforward about this. Okay, a lot of the young guys out there that are currently looking to get married, okay, they always think to themselves that, yeah, you know what, to get a nice wife, I got to be strong. Well, actually, they're totally wrong. And this is basically a piece of advice to all the guys out there looking to get married. If you want to find somebody who would love you and respect you, it's simply a case, okay? Basically, from my experience, your partner loves somebody who can show vulnerability, who can show that
Mhm.
emotion, right? And the bottom line is, and I'm going to call out all of these guys on this, okay, that it takes a true man. It takes somebody brave, courageous to really face what's going on in here and face it head on. That is bravery. Anything else is just basically brushing it away. I mean, Sayed, would you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ahlebait alayhi salatu wasalam, say
Mm,
that Ar-Rijalu Qawwamuna ala Nisa, that although this is taken wrongly and many men use it to impose their authority over the women and children. But in reality, and in looking at the practice and seerah and norms and traditions of Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, we find that prophets and imams did not impose their authority over their ladies. I mean, they were very kind, they were very polite, they were respecting them, and they never, I mean, I challenge everyone to show me where Imam or Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had shouted at his wife or became angry. Although in some cases we know that our Imams and even Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam may have had some partners who were their partners, but in the back they were stabbing him, like Imam Hassan was poisoned by his wife. And also there were some disobedient other wives. And not only Prophet Muhammad, I mean, you look at other prophets as well, and they had problem. Or other way around as well. I mean, like Pharaoh's wife was a pious woman, her husband was different. So we cannot just generalize and say that it's only men who behave like that. There are women who are different as well in our society. So our responsibility and duty is first of all not to consider ourselves, not to impose ourselves as a dictator on our family and children. We have to sit down and discuss and be polite. I mean, we none of us are infallible, and if I'm not infallible, my children are not infallible as well. I'm bound to do mistake, and the children are also bound to do some mistakes. So we have to be considerate, and we have to think, and we have to listen to them and give them benefit of doubt and not jump into conclusion. I mean, I'm just dealing with a divorce case right now. Uh, as soon as the brother approached me, he just accused his wife of everything, and na'udzubillah, he considers herself as someone who is a prostitute. I said, look, she is mother of your children, and she is dealing with the day-to-day life and difficulties and problems. And if you are accusing her of this, first of all, see what is the reason. Maybe you're not giving the needed love and affection to her. You're not showing it to her. Prophet Muhammad used to say, a man should tell his wife, I love you on a daily basis, even if he is lying. Even if he's lying, he should make a habit of saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, because that changes the issue, the whole situation in the mind of ladies. Ladies like to listen. And a man who is willing to say, I love you to his wife, even he has some ill feelings from her, is a brave man, is a truly masculine man.
Oh, I
Not
hope
Sayed, I don't. I think it's not just the women that like to hear it. I think us guys like to hear "I love you" as well. Sayed, I don't know about you, but I'd love to hear it every day from my wife saying "I love you, darling." But I think just to sort of quickly get your point. I love what you said there. But let me ask a quick sort of just pose a point to think about. Many men, okay, I know one particular individual, okay, that was never toxic, one of the nicest guys in the world. He got married. I met him after 5 years, and say it, this guy was like the most toxic masculine guy you could ever meet. And then when I sort of started thinking about it, I realized it was because of the marriage he was in. He wasn't happy, he wasn't able to express himself in the marriage, and that's what made him toxic. I mean, in your experience, have you found that that's quite a common case?
Yes, unfortunately. I mean, although there are women who get attracted to that kind of men, but
Yeah.
they don't think in the long term. Recently, I was dealing with another divorce case where the husband was, I mean, he was a professional in martial arts. So,
Wow.
and whenever, so that attracted her to him, but she didn't think of that
Mm.
this martial art could be used against her as well. So she should have done more research about his akhlaq, his behavior, his reactions in the
Yeah.
society. I mean, it's good to have, it's good to know martial arts, but to use it in a wrong place, especially with your family and children, is
Yeah.
certainly not acceptable. And of course, she didn't know that he would be that, because she's from one family and he's from another family, and
Yeah.
they were not brought up together, and they just met each other and they started to love and like. At the beginning, in her honeymoon period, everything is lovey-dovey and they are very close to each other. But later on, when the things start becoming difficult, the reactions are witnessed. And this is where the man, I mean, who knows martial art, I mean, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib was the most brave man.
Yeah.
But see his character with his wife. He used to help her. He used to be very kind to her. He used to be very polite. And after Hazrat Fatima Zahra's death, Prophet Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib used to cry, and people heard him crying. So it didn't reduce in Imam Ali's braveness and masculinity.
See, I
I
think that
love
one of the main common threads that
what
we can see
you
from here. Sorry, but I think what the one main common thread that we can see throughout all of this, okay, Mukhtar, Rasul Pak, Imam Ali, Imam Hussain, Hazrat Abbas, is the fact that all of these men had confidence. Okay, and the
Yeah,
fact that they had that confidence allowed them, not to worry about what people are thinking about them or how they feel. They were confident within themselves. And I think us as human beings, we need to be the same thing. Now, I think also when we talk about toxic masculinity, we all of a sudden take that if any man is masculine, by granted he's going to be toxic, right? But that's not the case. It's like saying that every Manchester United football player is a professional football player. That's a correct statement. But not every football player is a United player, right? So in the same way, not all men are toxic. It is those men, and I'm going to say it outright, those men that are underconfident, that are self-doubting, that don't have the belief or the strength to face up to themselves. Those are the toxic men. And there are still some gems out there like the Syed here, and I would like to say myself, but I'm not going to say that, that do have that confidence, that aren't toxic and are still masculine in their own right, and by giving respect, by giving by basically by treating people the way you want to be treated, it's like you get it back. And I would also go as far as to say that any self-respecting masculine man is always going to be afraid of his wife and will always do right by her, because I know I do.
I love everything that you've said, and I'm really happy to have a guest like you because you've answered and you've asked many of the questions that I normally would as well, which is amazing. No,
Sorry.
no, it's absolutely brilliant because this is what the show is here for, is to bring people like yourself to have those voices. And that's why I was really keen to have you on, especially with this topic, because to be honest, it is you that needs to speak majority of the time because you are of that gender, and the Said as well, having his experience and being in those kind of like situations where he deals with it. The other thing I also hear of on the other extreme, which I'm going to throw you off, is that there's not enough men around that are masculine. There is that side of it as well. Well, maybe there are, showing, because maybe sometimes that, especially in the new generation, they could be slightly confused that if they were to come across, as a masculine male, a little bit brave and strong, that's not even attracting the women because, but then they get it wrong, like you said, because women nowadays have actually increased in their own sort of power, in their own sort of way of being. And sometimes they want someone who is slightly even more so. So it's about having the balance. And like you mentioned, I think it's really
Mhm.
important what you said, that it's okay to be brave. It's okay to have the confidence. And just because you're showing up in that way doesn't mean that it's toxic. I think that's what the crux of this whole topic is about. And I think you said it, and you've sort of, and the underlying point is exactly what I wanted to get to be honest. So, what is your thoughts about certain male individuals nowadays that are not actually showing up as being sort of masculine, or maybe they're showing too much affection, too much vulnerability? And do you think that's also something to sort of like discuss, and is it a problem? Because I know a lot of women also do complain about that too.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest, right, okay? What no one wants, yeah, is somebody who's sitting there crying away about all the problems and vulnerabilities. No, I mean, at that point, yeah, you need to man up. Like, there is actually a fine line about that. But on the same token, I do feel that the definition of masculinity from my generation to what my kids' generation is has changed a
Yes.
lot. Okay, for me to be masculine in my generation, I had to be tough. Couldn't cry, couldn't show no feelings. But for my son, I would think he's masculine with the way he respects his mother, his sister, and his wife. Okay. The fact that he can say that, you know what, dad, I'm feeling really sad today because of XYZ reason. Dad, I feel like I want to cry. That to me is masculinity, or that in today's day and age, I personally would define as masculinity, because to basically look inside yourself, to look at your own demons, to look at how you feel, is the bravest thing that anyone can do. And Syed, correct me if I'm wrong, but Imam Ali said that you can't achieve. Again, I don't know the saying, so I'm going to paraphrase it. Please correct me. But in order to know Allah, you need to know yourself, right? And in order to know yourself, you have to come to terms with the dark side of you, the wrongs that you've done, the thoughts that you've had, right? That in itself is bravery. And I teach my kids, my son and my daughter, that, you know what, in brave, this is what it means, especially to my son. If you have to face up to what you've done, it's not a case of like, yeah, I've done this and what? What are you going to do about it? No, admit it. Hold your hands up. You've done the time. You got to do the crime, and that's how you learn and that's how you grow. So masculinity is basically facing your own demons. It's basically growing within yourself, okay, and being confident that, you know what, that I am working in collaboration with the opposite sex. I mean, say, what would you think about that?
Yeah, I think the profession later on you adopt and the environment you live in has a lot of effect on your way of life. For example, I mean, my father was a scholar, and I also studied in Hausa, Ilmiya Qum, and but he was very he couldn't deal with the cases that I'm dealing. Oh, he had very difficulty. I remember once a lady died, and within an hour, when the news was broken to the husband died as well. So it was
Wow.
a very emotional environment, and the funeral had to take place, and I was there, and my father was there. My father couldn't lead the prayer because he was affected so much, and he pushed me forward and asked me, "You lead the prayer," because he couldn't. Or
Mm,
another example, he would avoid dealing with the family problems, and although if he dealt, he used to take a lot of time, and he never divorced anyone in his life. He passed all the cases of divorce to me. Uh, even even when he had to reach the conclusion, he used to tell me, "Look, I think
mhm.
this is the right case, and the divorce should be done, and but I'm not going to do it. You do it." So
Why is that, Syed?
I don't know. He maybe he was weaker than me, and the environment I was brought up in, I was kind of more confident than
Mm,
him. I mean, he witnessed the division of India and Pakistan and all atrocities and problems that went on during that time. And then when he went to Iraq, there was a revolution. Then he was in Iran. There was a
mm,
revolution. Then we went to Africa. There was another Idi Amin type of. So he spent most of his life just migrating and migrating and migrating,
yeah.
and but he made sure to for us to get a stable life,
Mm.
and gave us more confidence. So although he was going through a difficult time, but he gave the confidence. Sometimes people say uh, maybe I'm overconfident than him.
I think it's amazing to hear really wise, intellectual men speak about this, and I'm glad that you've taken this opportunity to speak. It's gone by so quickly, and we've only got another 5 minutes left. So I want to come to you, Brother Jawad, with regards to giving some advice to our, current generation, the new generation, about being, masculine. What would you sort of like, give the guidance, give some sort of like, insight, as you have gone through quite a bit of experience yourself and come to a stage where you've also changed your mindset. So what would you like to give some sort of guidance and lasting words to some of our young men out there?
So basically, to all of the young dudes, all the young guys out there, yeah, the only thing that I would say is that if you really want to man up, just face what's inside. If you
Mm.
can look inside your heart and face it and resolve it, you know what? Then you're a man. If you can't, then you're not a man. Because being a man is about having patience, is about facing up to you. Get to know yourself. And once you know who you are, then you can then basically tell other people what they're like. Okay. But if you can't face yourself, then you know what? Honestly, there's you're not a man. Pure and simple. I'm going to just say it outright.
No, thank
And
you
that's
so much.
that's and that's
Sayed,
what one
go.
of the sayings and hadith says, that a person who knows who he is can recognize his Lord and his responsibilities and duties. So we need to discover ourselves first.
I think that's an amazing ending, and I think that you've highlighted so much in a very short space of time. I could have asked you so many more questions, and inshallah, we'll have to have you back on again, because you really can,
Thank
deliver
you.
what is required. And to be honest, I could not have said anything better or different myself. That's why it is here that we have this kind of platform, in order to bring amazing voices like yours. And thank you so much for your time and your insights. And I hope that, inshallah, that, some people have taken away from this. Thank you so much, Syed Rizvi, and to our brother Mohammed Jawad, for joining us tonight. It's a really interesting topic. And I think that we do need to make some changes in our household when we are raising men, especially young men that are growing into this world, who are going to be the future leaders and influencers. We do have women who are also in those platforms as well. I'm not taking away from that fact, but we are, dealing with toxic masculinity, which means that if you are masculine, does not mean that you should be toxic. If you have the right balance and faith in place, and hopefully taking on all the advice that our guests have put